Dedan Kimathi by Kenneth Watene is a biographical political drama that portrays the life, trial, and execution of Dedan Kimathi, a key leader of the Mau Mau rebellion against British colonial rule in Kenya. While not as well known internationally as the trial of Dedan Kimathi by Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Michere Mugo, 1976, Watene's 1974 version is significant in Kenyan theatre for its nationalistic message, historical relevance, and focus on African resistance. The play dramatizes the final days of Kimathi's life following his capture by British colonial forces in 1956. It depicts his imprisonment, interrogation, and trial, focusing on his unwavering refusal to denounce the Mau Mau movement or cooperate with the colonial authorities. Rather than portray Kimathi as merely a militant, Watene presents him as a symbol of African dignity, resistance, and martyrdom. Kimathi is presented as both a historical figure and a mythical hero, someone who stands firm in his beliefs even when faced with death. The play is structured around dialogues between Kimathi and his captors, including British officers, colonial judges, and African collaborators. These interactions reveal both the psychological pressure placed on Kimathi and the ideological clash between colonialism and African nationalism. Throughout the play, Kimathi is urged to confess his crimes, renounce violence, and accept the authority of the colonial government in exchange for mercy. But he remains defiant, insisting that his actions were part of a just struggle to free Kenya from British oppression. His captors cannot understand his spiritual strength, rooted in a deep belief in justice, land rights, and African self-determination. The play ends with Kimathi being sentenced to death, but he walks to his execution without fear, proud of the cause he fought for. His death is not portrayed as a defeat but as a spark for future liberation, with the implication that the struggle for freedom will continue. Analysis. 1. Historical and political context. To understand the play, it's essential to know the historical context of Dedan Kimathi. He was a real-life leader of the Mau Mau uprising, 1952–1960, a militant campaign against British colonial rule and the settler occupation of Gikuyu land. The Mau Mau were labeled as terrorists by the British, but many Kenyans saw them as freedom fighters. Watene's play was written in post-independence Kenya, at a time when the country was trying to reclaim and reframe its colonial history. Dedan Kimathi had been executed as a criminal, but many Kenyans began to view him as a national hero whose role in independence had been overlooked or suppressed. The play serves as a form of historical correction, elevating Kimathi's image from that of a rebel to that of a visionary leader and symbol of Kenyan sovereignty. 2. Heroism and martyrdom. Kimathi is portrayed as a heroic martyr, someone who sacrifices his life for the freedom of his people. His dignity in captivity, his refusal to plead for mercy, and his willingness to die for a cause place him in the tradition of tragic heroes. Watene emphasizes that true heroism lies not in military success but in moral conviction. Kimathi becomes a Christ-like figure, a man persecuted by a corrupt regime but who remains spiritually unbroken. His death, like that of other martyrs, is not an end but a beginning, a call for continued resistance. This dramatization of Kimathi reflects a broader post-colonial trend in African literature that seeks to celebrate indigenous heroes and resist colonial narratives that branded freedom fighters as criminals. 3. Colonialism and resistance. The core conflict of the play is between colonial authority and African resistance. The British officials represent imperial power, rational, legalistic, and oppressive. They believe in law and order but fail to recognize the injustice of their rule. In contrast, Kimathi speaks from a moral high ground, arguing that British law is illegitimate in a land stolen from its people. Through intense courtroom scenes and prison dialogues, Watene critiques the hypocrisy of colonial justice. The play suggests that the real criminals are those who stole land, exploited labor, and suppressed freedom, not those who resisted. By staging these confrontations, Watene not only honors the courage of people like Kimathi but also challenges audiences to reflect on the lingering legacies of colonialism, even in post-independence Africa. 4. Identity and nationhood. Kimathi's speeches are filled with references to land, ancestors, and African unity. For him, the Mau Mau struggle is not just political, it is spiritual and cultural. The loss of land is not only economic but also a loss of identity. Regaining it is essential for the rebirth of a true African nation. Watene uses Kimathi to express a vision of national pride and self-definition, rooted in indigenous values rather than colonial systems. This theme resonates strongly in the 1970s, when many African nations were navigating the complexities of independence, neo-colonialism, and national consciousness. In this way, Kimathi's voice is not just historical, it becomes prophetic, speaking to the present and the future. 5. The role of African collaborators. An important aspect of the play is its attention to African collaborators, those who sided with or served the colonial government. These characters are often more brutal or cynical than the British themselves. Watene presents them not simply as villains, but as tragic figures, caught between fear, survival, and power. However, their betrayal is contrasted sharply with Kimathi's integrity, highlighting the moral choices Africans had to make under colonialism. This element of the play forces audiences to confront uncomfortable questions. What would I have done? Is silence the same as complicity? Can freedom be achieved without sacrifice? 6. Theatrical style and symbolism. Watene employs a minimalist, symbolic style in the play. The action is mostly confined to prison cells and courtrooms, creating a sense of claustrophobia that mirrors the mental and political confinement of colonial rule. Kimathi's body becomes a symbol of land, of resistance, of identity. His refusal to bow or break becomes a ritual of defiance, a performance of dignity in the face of power. The stark contrasts between Kimathi's calm speech and the aggressive tone of his interrogators also serve to dramatize the moral inversion of colonial power structures, where justice is criminalized and resistance is truth. Conclusion. Kenneth Watene's Dedan Kimathi is a passionate and deeply political play that seeks to reclaim African history, honor the sacrifices of freedom fighters, and challenge colonial narratives. Through the portrayal of Kimathi as a principled and visionary leader, Watene elevates the Mau Mau struggle from a rebellion to a sacred mission for liberation. The play reminds us that independence was not given but fought for, and that the memory of that struggle must be preserved and honored. Kimathi's voice echoes beyond the prison walls, calling for a future built on justice, dignity, and the unbreakable spirit of African self-determination. Though set in the past, the themes of Dedan Kimathi, identity, resistance, justice, and legacy, remain urgent and universal, especially in societies still grappling with the shadows of colonialism.